Does anyone else feel like road bike innovation has stalled over the last few years? It seems like since 2020 or so, most bike brands have shifted into this single bike solution. Not in the sense that I often discuss here, where you use a gravel bike as a road bike, but in the pure road bike sense. We've gotten away from the chat about having on one end of the spectrum an ultralight climbing bike and on the other end an ultra fast aero bike. The latter seems to have died in the 2010s. Instead, we've moved to this middle ground of bikes. They're pretty light, they're aero enough, and they're essentially built to do it all. A road bike quiver killer, if you will. After years of stagnation, I think the discussion has started to change. It has started to include more thoughts about innovation, specifically aerodynamics, and Colnago is leading the charge. Now, did anyone else have Colnago ushering in a new chapter of aero bikes on their bingo card? I didn't, but maybe I should have. Colnago has a rich history of innovation, UAE, and some guy named Tadej riding their bikes. And all it takes is one quick look at his riding style to understand the why behind the development of this bike, and more on that later. See, I think 2025 is the return to focusing on aerodynamics, and Colnago is playing their card first with the Y1Rs, which leaked a couple weeks ago to a very polarizing response. Love it or hate it, that's what innovation looks like. So let's stop complaining and applaud the proverbial pushing of the envelope. Heck, everyone who complained about the way aero bikes looked in 2016 should look at their current road bike and be grateful for that polarizing tech that trickled down to your modern road bike, making you and I faster. Now we'll dive into the Y1RS in a second, but kudos to Colnago. It's about time that a brand starts swinging for the fences again. And on the heels of 81 wins for UAE and 25 wins for Tadej himself, it's a great year for Colnago to swing for the fences. When you consider that 18 of Tadej's 25 wins were solo, the logic behind the development of the Y1RS starts to make even more sense. It's his race-to-race weapon of choice, and one that will give him a greater advantage on those long 60 to 80 kilometer solo breakaways that we're bound to see again in 2025. But I don't think that it's just for the pros. One of the things that's great about cycling is that for the right price, you can ride the same equipment as the pros. Now, I know that that statement alone will trigger a few angry comments, but compare it to something like F1. I don't know anyone who's ever driven Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas's cars, but you can ride the same bike as Tadej, Remco, and Jonas at your local group ride or in your next race. And I think that's pretty cool. But because it's something available to the masses, it has to be something that we can live with day in and day out, a daily driver, if you will. The Y1RS will inevitably have the complexities of an aero bike, but I get the sense that Colnago wanted this to be something that could be ridden day in and day out somewhat comfortably, and not just raced. We see that in the shape of the rear end, giving it a more compliant feel on the road. It has clearance for a measured 32 millimeter tire. That's important to note. Not necessarily 32 millimeter tires, but a measured 32 millimeter tire. My 30 millimeter Continental GP5000 STRs mounted on my MV45s measure to 32 millimeters. You probably don't want to push the envelope there. Some will complain that every modern road bike should have 35 millimeter tire clearance, and yeah, maybe they're right, but this is a very specific tool for a very specific job. And if you don't feel it has adequate tire clearance, it's probably not the bike for you, and that's okay. The bars remind me of a set that I had on a previous aero bike. They're raised and they give that praying mantis look. Focusing on the front end, you also have this bayonet style fork and a head tube that's clearly taking advantage of the newly allowed 8:1 aspect ratio. The leaked photos I saw only showed one bottle mount on the down tube, but I've been assured that it will in fact have mounts for 2 bottles. And I can already hear the Nero show chat about it having aero bottles, but sorry, Chris and Jesse, this one is designed around traditional bottle shapes. And I get it, proprietary aero bottles would be cool, but in a race situation where the riders are grabbing traditionally shaped bottles from different sources, I see how this would be an issue. And for us normal folks, I'm glad that it's designed around the old traditional shape. The frame weight figures I saw were in the 1100 gram range, which shows the prioritization of aero over weight while being in line with bikes in this category. I'll post links below to Colnago's website, and if they're available, the white papers, which will show you a deep dive into the specs and science behind the Y1RS. Beyond the science, I'm excited to hear what it feels like to ride, which, look, it might take a couple months before we start seeing these bikes in the wild beyond the pro teams. Colnago bikes seem to have a feel to them, and I hope that holds true with the Y1Rs. What do you think? Is 2025 the year when we see the return of the Aero bike? Drop me a comment below and let me know your predictions. I've been hoping for the return of the Aero bike era for a couple years. In fact, in 2023, I made a video predicting the return of the Specialized Venge and the return of the Aero bike craze, arguing that the demand for Aero bikes was back and that as consumers, we were all salivating for innovation. What happened? Well, nothing. I mean, I shouldn't say nothing. We got the SL8, the best of the Venge, the Aethos, and the SL7, and a little bit of the SL6. By all accounts, an excellent bike. But in terms of aerodynamics, I kind of feel like they maybe left a little bit on the table. Maybe just enough so that they can surprise us with a Venge 2.0 this next year. Am I doubling down on my prediction? Maybe. Whatever the case, there's excitement when innovative bikes like the Colnago Y1Rs launch. It might not be the bike for you, but it breeds competition, and the technology and development findings from bikes like this will inevitably trickle into the bikes we ride for years to come, making you faster and creating an overall better and more exciting cycling experience, which I think is a win-win for everybody. Anyways, if you like this video, I'll post links to some of my current gravel and road builds up above or down below. And if you have any questions, drop me a line on Instagram. Anyways, thanks for watching. Until next time.